Okay, hello and welcome to Stampscapes Show-and-Tell. This is the January-February 1997 Rubber Stamper magazine. Premiere issue, first issue, so I don't know when this came out, but probably in 1996. I thought I would take a quick look through this and see what was around at the time and see what styles of stamping were being done. This was a new magazine, of course, with the premiere issue, but I don't remember how many were around at that time. Of course, Rubber Stamp Madness. But this is also the business-to-business edition, so it was a copy that was sent out to both retailers and manufacturers at the time. How they got there, or our addresses, I don't know, probably through the other publications at the time and the source information, or just the advertisements in the other publications. But I don't know. I'm surprised they have so many ads in this premiere issue. It was they did have a dedicated salesperson calling around to see if we'd want to advertise, but personal stamp exchange, full page ad, Stuart Superior. Stuart Superior was and is a supplier of different materials. The cushion that used to use on stamps, the wood. They made pads, and I still think they do. I think they do branding, so I think they make stamp pads with other brand names printed on them. Different types of pads. I used to get my wood from them. Tsukaneko, makers of VersaFine and material that I like using a lot. And Tack and Peel. Looks like they had their pads back in the day and are still around. There's a different look to these magazines, isn't there, in terms of the design. Hampton Art stamps. Love those peg stamps up here. Embossing tools, heat guns, a lot more embossing back in the day. Embossing is the thing that I would say in the 80s and early to mid 90s, that's the thing. The medium that really got the hook into people and got people really into the hobby of rubber stamping. It was the technique that everyone really, really loved. And throughout this book here, you'll probably find a lot of embossed imagery in here. Still at the time, everyone was doing embossing. I did a little informal survey one time about why and how people got into rubber stamping at one of my workshops, and I would say 80% would say embossing as we went around one at a time. And you can see these hero arts. It's looks like gold right here, but looks like those images right there are embossed. It's just a ton of embossing at the time. Later on, when I would ask that question, the answer often came back Stampin' Up. So Stampin' Up was often the hook, or the kind of the avenue in which people got into stamping. But look at that, angels embossed right there. Collage was becoming big. I noticed when I did a brief kind of flip through of this magazine. I haven't looked at these magazines in years and years and years. And oftentimes I was just so busy back in the day, I would just kind of flip through it and kind of put it away. I wouldn't kind of read them as, I don't know, things were just so crazy busy. But I don't know if those leaves right here are embossed too. It might be. But collage was, like I said, was becoming really big. I don't know. Other types of there were real kind of narrative styles of stamping being done by male artisans, stamping on envelopes, embossing, collage tips here. Let's see, who was the author of this one? I don't know who wrote this one. The business-to-business aspect of this was there's a little insert in the middle of this magazine that went out to everyone. But going through here, I see a lot of stores that I recognize that carried Stampscape stamps. Here's Stamp Time, Enchanted Cottage. Museum of Modern Rubber was a manufacturer that I really enjoyed seeing at all the different shows that we used to do. We used to do conventions in Carson and Northern or Bay Area, California. And you'd see them at places like it's the Cincinnati Convention, and so on and so forth. Inkadinkadoo, they're still around. The makers, I believe, of the roller stamps way back in the day. That was in the 80s, late 80s. But so many innovative stamp companies. This one's Visual Image Printery. Used to love their designs, but I'd see them on all the Carson shows. If there was a company out there, they always tried to get into Carson, and if they didn't, they were on a waiting list. But you'd recognize a lot of these manufacturers here because everyone would be doing the Carson show, because it was kind of the equivalent of doing both a retail show and a wholesale show, because all the rubber stamp retailers would attend it. This is Stamp Cabana here. The owner was an architecture, I think he had an architecture degree, so he's really good at drawing buildings and really good perspective, stippled work, and they also had several stores in Florida. I taught at about one or two of them, I think, two for sure, while I was doing a teaching circuit out there one time. But yeah, they had a lot of different designs out there. Oh, look at this one right here. That one's using my palm cluster stamp right here, with a bunch of Rubber Baby Buggy bumper stamps. Might recognize that name if you've been a long-time stamper. They, Judy Ken's Rubber Baby Buggy bumpers had this gigantic pile of rubber in the middle of their booth, which was the catch of their, thing, and kind of the, I don't know what you'd call it, the theme or the, kind of the trademark of their booth. It is a gigantic pile of rubber, so people would go in there with a mirror and they'd be looking at rubber, figuring out what the images are, because you can see it backwards. A lot of times it was to read quote type of stamps, but that was always a kick, seeing just hordes of people in the middle of this, kind of surrounding this big thing of rubber. It sounds like everyone's sitting around like a bonfire or something like that. It wasn't on fire, but I'm just saying, how people sit around things and just dig through things, And most people would mount their stamps back in the day. They'd get those and they would mount them. Okay, we weren't using unmounted stamps as like we are now. Denami designs. Stamp stores right here. So a lot of different stamp stores in different states too. Then what I remember, I mean, there were these stores and many, many more at that time, but I guess things had really kind of kicked off and were moving at a brisk pace at that time. So yeah, probably the mid-90s is when things really got moving. You felt it kind of moving, the rubber stamp kind of movement in the early 90s in established areas, and then you started seeing more and more conventions in different areas. And then you just saw kind of explosions of stores opening up in all of these different areas, kind of hotbeds of stamping, Colorado and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, certainly in Washington and Oregon. Like there's one store here in Oregon. I don't know if these were paid advertisements or if they were just. And here's one of my little cloud stamps from A Stamp in the Hand. It was kind of this cloud negative space stamp. I don't know if you can see it right there, but look at all these different types of stamping being done here. Kind of not the same as you see today. You see a lot more kind of elaborate types of usage uses of stamps in conjunction with other types of things that people would be doing on like a Cricut or something like that, stencils, so on and so forth. So you saw some, kind of basic applications here. Really quite elegant though, but embossing with watercolors, watercolor impressions right here probably. You do watercolor, or you color a stamp, and then you kind of do a little wash over it with a paintbrush and then stamp it out for that real kind of washy, kind of real pleasant kind of watercolory look. Oh, Stamp Oasis, Stamparosa, you might know them for house mouse designs if you've been stamping for a while. Judykins, but Stamp Oasis used to hold their stamp conventions out there, and were a long time and retailer in Las Vegas, and the first store out there, I believe. A lot of good memories out there. I flew out to their store one time, teaching classes. That's back in the day when you can get in your plane with 10 minutes, to go or something like that. But I remember we were eating dinner after, and I'm thinking, well, it's 1 hour to go. Maybe I should get to the airport. There, you're fine, And I got there with like 10 minutes before the plane took off, and I was sure that my bag wouldn't make it on the plane, because I checked it, and it got on the plane, but visions of, if you were old enough, O.J. Simpson running through an airport, that Hertz, I think it was the Hertz, rental car commercial. He was running through the airport, and I just had visions of that, just running up stairways and escalators and running out to the my gate to get on the plane, and I just barely got on, and I was just dripping sweat, and I was thinking, oh, I'm never going to do that, and I'm going to get to the airport on time, next time. But anytime I've been kind of rushing at an airport, I remember that time at Stamp Oasis. There's one of my stamps right there. There's Lakeside Cove, large, done in some sort of it's a breakthrough in stamping, Kaleidocolor. I guess we use the Kaleidocolors right here. Oh, this is a great advancement in kind of rainbow stamping technology. It's those pads where you kind of pull it back and it separates the different colors, so that when these are, when you're using them as a rainbow pad, they're not just all connected and kind of intermingling, in terms of the inks, while you have them. But that was a cool kind of a advancement back in the day. Okay, here's the rubber stamper business to business one. This is something that the general public wouldn't see, but it was talking about how to promote things and how to kind of help you with your businesses, how to display things, trends, service, how you, kind of treat your customers and greet them and whatnot. Manager's memo, sticky fingers, shoplifting, how to handle that type of thing. All kinds of little tips for the retailer. A lot of people that were into, or that ended up having stores, they were rubber stampers. They weren't coming from, business degrees and things like that. They were hobbyists. So, that's what made this industry and community so cool, is that the owners and things like that, it's cottage industry. So, the owners knew everything about the media because they were users and big, fans of the actual medium. So Adirondack pads from Ranger Industries, new products coming out, all kinds of little things like that. New things, showcase, product showcase. Okay, and then we're back to the regular content here. I was looking at this bag works here. I was wondering if that was kind of a supplies for stores or something. I'm not really quite sure. Alaska cruise. Oh my gosh. I was asked to go on a couple of these different cruises through the years, but I just never had time. I was asked to go and teach on these cruises as a guest instructor. This one has Dee and Suze, Dee Granick and Suze Weinberg. but I could never get away for like a week and a half or 2 weeks, whatever it would be required to go on a cruise. But you would go on these cruises, and I think you had to teach like 2 classes or something like that. There was a stamp room, as far as I understand, where people can go and just stamp during the day. And you'd go into ports of call and everything like a normal cruiser, but there would just be these special activities. And I remember seeing a photo of, like a group photo of the stamping group, and there were quite a few people that went on these cruises. I'm not sure if it was this one, but Stampadoodle, who was I think the first store up in Washington, or one of the first stores, stamping stores that were up there, hosted this, or coordinated and hosted this event, but they were a really awesome store. And they just closed up not too long ago, relatively speaking. And I taught at their store maybe 2 or 3 times through the years. It was fantastic, really big and complete store up there. Hot potatoes, wall stamping. Okay, you take these big sponge stamps and stamp on walls. I can't remember her name, but she was on the Carol Duvall show a lot. Schmooze with Suze. Looks like maybe she had a featured little segment in these magazines. I'm not really quite sure. But all these different stores, Bizarro, they might have been at some of those first conventions that I attended with a Stamp of the Hand company when I worked for them in the late 80s. But there's all these different companies that I see, and it brings back a lot of memories of seeing them at the different shows. Rubber Soul and Polsbo, I taught at their store, Washington. Went there for, I don't know what it was called, it was this event. And I just remember this really brisk pace of, I don't know, people were rotating through stations. I seem to recall there was a couple different locations, like the store and their workshop area were in different buildings or something. I don't know what it was, or they rented a place for that night. Stamps by Judith, just saw them a couple weeks ago at the Mesa, Arizona show. Dee Grunig, her book right here, I don't know if that's a video too. Yeah, that's her third video. VHS at the time, of course. But, yeah, Rubbernecker. All kinds of different things right here. I'm sure this is probably Dee's. Yeah, by Dee Grunig. You can always tell her stamping right here. But using the Marvy brush marker, she's the one that made the Marvy brush markers, the 1500 series of markers, so popular in rubber stamping. I think she had kind of a licensed or whatever. She licensed her name to them, I think, for different products at times. Really important in the stamp industry was Dee, and promoting it, and she was on the Carol Duvall show all the time. Stickopotamus. I never heard of them, but they were probably more in the kind of the early stages of scrapbooking. Okay. All kinds of different things. Just flipping through here, I can talk about these different things for days. Rubber Stamps of America with the Ken Brown line of rubber stamps. Really cool rubber stamps. That might be his designs out, I'm not sure. But in Sesame Street, you used to see these little videos, and used to see some of his stamp designs being used in little animations. I believe they're rubber stamps. Maybe he animated into rubber stamps, and then they saw that and found him and licensed it. I don't know what the story is, but it'd be cool to kind of find out. I should still see if he's still around. Auntie Amy Stamps in Riverside. She was the one that used to host the Riverside Stamp Convention out there. Kind of in, I don't know, as a response to the overwhelming want or whatever response to the Carson show, where a lot of companies just could not get into the Carson show. I mean, she could have had, at the Carson show, there could have been 80 booths, if everyone was allowed to attend there. So Riverside is real close to Carson, California, so there was another show being done at a different time of year there. Kaleidocolor, there's that. Stamp Diego. I'm in San Diego there. I went into their store one time. Baby Buggy Bumpers. Keepsakes magazines. Sparkles. Laguna Niguel. I never went to that store, but they were around for quite some time. Companies mentioned in this issue. Okay, look at this, coming in March. Masking techniques, you know. Stamping on post-it notes, probably vellum, clear acetate, things like that with permanent inks. Stamping on fabric. You don't see that being done too much anymore. Does anyone stamp on fabric? Does anyone remember all these different companies, or did you have a subscription to the Rubber Stamper magazine? I don't know, leave me a comment in the comment section. Etching. Stampendous here from Fran from Stampendous. And Clear Snap. Closed last year. They used to make the color box stylus tools, but innovative in so many different ways. Made these. They made all these different cases right here. I can see the color box case was a little bit different than the smaller version. That was a Pigment Ink there, one of the first Pigment Ink manufacturers. If they weren't the first, I don't know. But look at this, Vivid stamping pads right here. This right here. These Vivid pads were one of the first raised stamping pads, okay? You didn't used to see these raised pads, okay? Pads used to be recessed, you know, so that the ink wouldn't flow out and, you know, spill out everywhere. So you get these more denser pads and thicker inks so that, you know, that's not going to pour out of there. But these pads have long since been discontinued. I'm guessing, you know, Clear Snap just closed last year or so, but these pads of theirs had been discontinued for umpteen years. I'm guessing 20 years or more, at least. But I just pulled this off the shelf here. And I've used this pad before, but look at that. It's still moist after all those years. Talk about quality. I just wish these were around still. But what would happen was these pads were around, and a lot of people had them, but then new pads from other companies would come out, and, you know, stampers and crafters, we love new things, so there was always that new kid on the block, you know, and new line on the block. And everyone would be getting those, and then people would kind of forget about the, you know, the other pads because they just want that new thing, that hot new product on the market. So these ones just kind of got lost in the shuffle. If I was them, I would have repackaged this and, you know, kind of, as long as they were printing on there, come up with something more, a little bit more dynamic or call it something else. But these pads are really fantastic. And like I said, they're just such high quality. I never re-inked this either. And this is probably, I don't know. It was probably from, you know, those late 90s or something like that. So, I don't know. They're still juicy and working and whatnot. And I don't know, just a great pad. Great product and great company. I was sad to see them go. But thanks, Clear Snap, for your great products and innovation and for everything you provided for the industry. Rubber Stamper Magazine. Like I said, did you remember this one, or did you used to have a subscription or buy it on the newsstand? Used to see this all over in the different bookstores and whatnot and crafting stores. But yeah, I have a huge section of them on my bookshelf loaded up. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the little show and tell here of the premiere issue, once again, of the January-February 1997 Rubber Stamper Magazine. Thanks for watching.